Hello everyone, welcome to English Succour. Today's session is based on the fourth lesson of Supplementary Reader, Class 12th Vistas, The Enemy by Paul S. Buck, Part 2 of Detailed Explanation. So today I'll help you understand the characters and theme and also help you to develop an insight into the story. Before we move ahead, let's have a quick recapitulation. In the previous part, we saw that the narrator starts the story with the description of the location of Dr. Sadao Hoki's house at Japanese coast, and we learned that he had spent his childhood also at the same Japanese coast, and he remembers about his father, how his father contributed a lot to shape his character, and how his father was extremely keen about his education, and he took a lot of pain to make a lot of sacrifices, as he was his only son, but he was sent abroad for America for his higher studies, to see him become a successful surgeon and scientist as well. We learned that what were the reasons that during the wartime, Second World War time, when on one hand other youngsters were being forcefully recruited in the army, Dr. Sadao was not sent along with the troop, and we see that as he was busy in preparing a medicine that would help the soldiers treat their or recover from their injuries within a short period, and moreover he was a successful surgeon, so he was very much indispensable for the old Japanese general, as he was ailing, and at any moment, any time, Dr. Sadao would be demanded. The story starts with the description of the weather when Dr. Sadao Hoki was returning home after his busy schedule as a physician, as a surgeon, and as a scientist. Every day he was very happy when he returns home. He thinks himself very much fortunate to have Hannah as his wife. The weather was foggy, and almost the entire scene was covered or screened by the mist, the fog. We learned that how Sadao and Hannah met in America, and how finally they got married after seeking the permission of Sadao's father. And then at this moment we see that Sadao and Hannah see that there was a man at the Japanese coast that could be visible from the doorstep of their house, that there was a man in utterly injured condition, and he was almost crawling. So let's see what happens next as both Sadao and Hannah run towards the shore to look into the matter. When they reached, they saw when they came toward him that indeed it was so. That means the man was severely injured, badly torn. The sand on one side of him had already a stain of red soaking through. The sand had absorbed a lot of blood, and clearly indicated that the man was injured and he was bleeding heavily. And he is wounded, Sadao exclaimed, and he made haste to the man, and he just was very quick in his movements towards the man, who was almost lying motionlessly on his face in the sand. And there was an old cap that was stuck to his head and soaked with sea water. He was in wet rags. Rags refers to torn clothes of garments, rags of garments. And Sadao stopped Hannah at his side. He didn't want her to do anything. And then he turned the man's head, and they saw the face now. Let's see, how did they react when they saw the face of this man? And immediately Hannah exclaimed in a whispering tone, "A white man!" Yes, it was a white man. The wet cap fell away, and there was his yet wet yellow hair, long as though for many weeks the hair had not been cut. And upon his young, although but tortured face, as it seems that he had been tortured, later on they'll find out that he was an American prisoner of war. So, and he had a tortured face for as if for several days he was suffering a lot, and and there was a rough yellow beard on his tortured face. He was unconscious, and he knew nothing what these two Japanese people do for him. Now, Sadao remembered the wound, although he was surprised to see the man and who was a white man, and but still he was a doctor, so he remembered immediately that being a doctor he should attend to the injuries of the man, and with his expert fingers he began to search for the wound. He wanted to find out from where the place of bleeding. Blood flowed freshly, and when he touched a particular place of his body, part of his body, blood started flowing freshly with his touch. And on the right side of his lower back, he said, I saw that there was a gun wound, and that had been reopened, and perhaps by the rocks of the shore, the wound had been reopened. The flesh was blackened with gunpowder, and sometime he guesses that sometime not many days ago the man had been shot by a bullet and had not been tended or treated. He didn't receive any treatment. And it was a bad chance or bad luck for him that the rock of the shore had hit him at his wounds and caused him further injuries. Oh, let's see how did Hannah react. How was her reaction when she saw the man was utterly injured? Oh, how he is bleeding. Hannah whispered again in a solemn voice, calm voice, sincere voice. The mist screened them now completely, and they were quite thankful to the mist that no one could see them attending a white man. And so far, it was not disclosed to them that the man was an American man, the enemy of the Japanese nation. The mist now screened them, hid them now completely, and at this time of the day no one came by the shore. The fishermen had gone home, and even the chance beachcombers would have considered the day at an end. The weather was already bad, and although it was not evening yet, but still it was quite dark outside. So those chance beachcombers means those people who go to the seashore just for fun, just for some time, for pleasure, and to just paddle at the seashore. So even they had considered that the day was almost about to end. So the coast was almost lonely, and it was a favorable factor for the Sadao couple. Now, what shall we do with this man? Sadao muttered. He was in a dilemma. What should he do? Of course, the man was serious, and he urgently required treatment. But his trained hands, although he was in a dilemma, but his trained hands of a doctor, of a surgeon, seemed of their own will, of their own desire to be doing what they could do to stop the fearful bleeding. So he could not help himself being a good doctor, being a sincere, honest doctor. So he packed, what did he do then? He packed the wound with the sea moss, the sea grass, and there was a lot of availability of the sea moss, as the beach was strewed with the sea moss. Scattered, the beach was almost covered with the sea moss. The man moaned, and when he did so, when he tried, Dr. Sadao tried to pack the wound to stop bleeding. The man moaned, groaned with pain in his stupor, in his unconscious state, but he was still unconscious. He did not awaken. The best thing that we could do would be to put him back in the sea, Sadao said, answering himself. Just he was talking to himself and he made this statement. Now that the bleeding was stopped for the moment, he stood up and dusted the sand from his hands. Yes, undoubtedly that would be the best, as the man was a white man and they would be suspected for just sheltering a white man, Hannah said steadily. But she continued to stare down at the motionless man, and she was helpless and she could not help herself being a good human being, although they intended to leave the man there only or to put him back into the sea, but none of them did so. And if we sheltered a white man, what was the dilemma? If we sheltered a white man in our house, we should be arrested, and if we turn him over as a prisoner to the police, he would certainly die. So Sadao says, so what's the use? What's the benefit of saving his life now? The kindest thing would be to put him back into the sea, Hannah suggested, but neither of them moved. They were just staring with a curious repulsion. There was a kind of repulsion or a hatred upon the inert, motionless figure. Then Hannah wanted to know about the identity of the man. What is he? And then there is something about him that looks American. So far, they just considered him a white man. So, just being a white man was sufficient for them not to attend that man, that because a white man could be an American or any other white man. So, they could be suspected that they were just giving a refuge to an American person. But now it became confirmed to them when they inspected everything closely. There is something about him that looks American, Sadao said. And then he took the battered, torn cap of the injured person, and yes, there, almost faded, gone, was the faded lettering, and what was written on the front side of the cap? A sailor. He informed Hannah, he read for Hannah that a sailor is written, and from an American warship. A sailor from an American warship. These words were written. And he spelled it out, U.S. Navy. So, the man was a prisoner of war. It was now disclosed quite clearly. And it was now clear that he has escaped. He is a prisoner of war and he has escaped. And Hannah cried softly that he has escaped, and that is why he is wounded. Yes, Sadao agreed that yes, he was shot at his back at the time he was trying to escape in the back. They hesitated. Now there was a lot of hesitation. They again a dilemma what to do. Earlier they thought he was a white man. Now it was clear that he was an American. He is an American. So they didn't know what to do. Looking at each other, then Hannah said with resolution, with a strong resolve, with a strong decision, that come, are we able to put him back into the sea? She gave a proposal to Sado. We must simply tell them, yes, if I am able, are you? Sado asked. If I am able to throw him back into the sea, are you able? No, Hannah said. But if you can do it alone, she wanted Sadao to take the step on his own, but Sadao hesitated again. He could not do this. This brings out that Sadao is a good human being, a true human being, and he could not treat another human being in such a brutal, insensitive manner. Equally, Hannah. The strange thing is, he said, that if the man were whole, means all right, in good condition, I could turn him, he would not certainly have any hesitation to hand him over to the police without any difficulty. I care because definitely he need not to care anything about this such a person who is the enemy of his nation. He's my enemy. He's my nation's enemy. So he should have soft corner for him. But the problem is the man is not whole, or he is not in a good condition, and he should treat all Americans are my enemy, and he is only a common fellow. Just look at him, such an ordinary boy or person he is. You see how foolish his face is. But since he is wounded, the question is, the dilemma, the problem is that the man is injured, and he is a doctor. Above all, he is a human being, and his being a good human being would doesn't allow him to leave the man in such a condition, or to treat him in any other brutal way by handing him over either to the police in the same condition, or to throw him back into the sea. Now, that means you also cannot throw him back in the sea, Hannah said. Then there is only one thing, there is only one now solution to this problem. We must carry him into our house. Now, this was the proposal made by Hannah, but the servants said out, inquired what would they tell the servants, or what would be the reaction of the servants. What about the servants? Then Hannah told him that we must simply tell them that we intend to give him, the prisoner of war, the American person, to the police, as indeed they were going to do the same thing. Said out, we must think of the children and your position, and it would endanger all of us, create a kind of risk for all of them, if they did not give this man over as a prisoner of war as soon as he gets recovered. So this was their plan. This was Hannah's plan, that first they should take the man to their home. They Sadao should give him treatment or necessary whatever was required for him, and then as soon as he would get recovered, they would certainly hand him over to the police. Certainly, Sadao agreed. I would not think of doing anything else, and at that moment he had no other idea. So thus agreed together, they lifted the man. He was very light, just like a fowl, a kind of light-weighted bird, and a kind of foul bird in a very starving condition, just with a skeleton-like body with feathers and bones, means very light-weighted. So this man also was very light-weighted, so it was very much easy for them to carry him. His arms almost hanging, they carried him up the steps and into the side door of their house. And this door opened into a passage, a corridor, and down the passage they carried the man towards an empty bedroom. It had been, now which room it was at Sadao's house? It had been the bedroom of Sadao's father, and since his death it had not been used. And they laid the man on the deeply matted floor. Deeply matted floor means thickly floor with thick carpet. Everything in this room had been, according to Japanese tradition, had been Japanese, to please, to suit the taste of the old man. Which old man is referred here? Sadao's father, who would never in his own home sit on a chair or sleep in a foreign bed. So he was very much traditional. He followed all the Japanese culture and customs. Hannah went to the wall cupboards and slid back a door and took out a soft quilt, a kind of bed covering. She hesitated, and it was a beautiful quilt, and she was not willing to use that quilt for the man who was almost bleeding, and especially a white man, an American. The quilt was covered with flowered silk, and the inner sheet was made of pure white silk. So she hesitated and said, "He's so dirty," she murmured in distress, disappointment, a lot of helplessness, what to do. And they were in a miserable state and helpless. Yes, he had. So when she saw that the man was so dirty, how could they spoil all their things with the blood of the man. So yes, he had better be washed. Sadao agreed, and he also suggested that first they should clean the body of the man, and he said that if she'll bring some hot water, he would wash him. But Hannah disagreed. That I cannot bear for you to touch him, she said. We shall have to tell the servants that he is here. Let's inform the servants. Let's take the servants in confidence. I'll tell Yumi, the senior most servant, the maid. She can leave the children, and who generally used to take care of the children in the nursery room. She can leave the children for a few minutes and she can wash him. So this was decided that she would ask Yumi to wash the man. Sadao considered this suggestion for a moment. Let it be so, he agreed. You tell Yumi and I'll tell the others. So hence it was decided that Hannah will inform Yumi and Sadao will inform all other servants about the presence of that white American prisoner of war and what was their intention for keeping that man. But the utter pallor of the man's unconscious face moved him first to stoop and feel his pulse. So again and again it is brought out that Sadao was not at all an insensitive man. Before leaving, he again took it seriously that the condition of the man was deteriorating. His total pallor, dullness on the face of the man, it was very serious, and then he bent. He decided to stoop and check the pulse of the person, and the pulse was faint, but it was there, suggesting that he was alive. He put his hand against the man's cold breast. The heart too was yet alive. And then he came to a conclusion that he will die unless he is operated on, Sadao said, considering for a moment, thinking for a moment. But the question, again he said that the question is whether he will not die anyway. Here it means that if at this moment, just by providing the necessary treatment to the man, they are able to save his life, but what is the guarantee that afterwards the man will not die? Certainly they were going to hand him over to the police. So when Sadao said so, Hannah also became conscious, and she said with fear, okay, don't try to save him. What if he should live? If at this moment he lives, what is the use? Because later on he'll have to die. So we'll have the lesson explanation up to here. These are vocabulary words. Do study these words for enrichment of vocabulary. Short answer type questions. How does the writer indicate that Dr. Sadao's father was a very traditional and conventional man? In what condition was the American sailor when Dr. Sadao found him at the seashore? Why did Sadao and his wife want to throw the man back into the sea? How did Sadao tend the wound of the man? What would be the initial steps taken by Sadao to give treatment to the man? What would be the best thing that they could do about the man, and why? So with this we come to the end. If you think this video helps you, please give a thumbs up to it, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to share it.